You know, Mazz, one of the things I love about cigars, other than the taste, obviously, is the history behind the cigars.
Well, there's a lot of history, a lot of tradition. I mean, when you think about tobacco use, it dates back to the Mayans, which is 2500 BC.
Yeah.
So tobacco use, you know, we're not here today to talk about the entire history of tobacco use in premium cigars.
But that would be a good video, by the way.
I agree. It would be a great video, maybe for another time. But today we're talking about basically what's become a legendary factory in the My Father factory,
Right.
the Garcia family, and to me, a very historic blend from them. And that's what we're smoking today.
Yeah, I agree. So today we're smoking the Don Pepin Cuban Classic.
It's one of my favorites. You ready
Mine
to get
too.
into it?
I am.
All right, let's go.
All right.
So what do you think?
Very smooth on the initial combustion. But before we talk about the blend, let's talk a little bit about the history.
Yeah, and there's great history and a great story behind the blend. You know, the Cuban Classic was blended by Pepin Garcia and Jaime Garcia.
Who are both legends in the industry, by the way.
Absolutely legends in the industry. And you know, when they came up with this blend, this Cuban Classic, they wanted to harken back to their roots, right? Considering the trials and tribulations that they went through to get to where they're at today, you know, and where they came from, Cuba. For decades, Cuba was a cigar mecca, home to families whose livelihoods and legacies were built around the traditions of tobacco. But Cuba wasn't just a paradise for cigar making, it was also a place of deep political turmoil.
By the late 1950s, Cuba faced intense social and political upheaval. Many families, including skilled cigar makers, found themselves caught in the crossfire.
As tensions rose and the Castro regime gained control, countless Cubans, including Don Pepin and his family, were faced with a difficult choice: stay and face an uncertain future, or leave everything behind. Don Pepin left Cuba in the late 1990s and settled in Nicaragua, where he continued to make some of the highest rated cigars the world has seen. And this Cuban Classic is no exception.
That is a great blend. But now that we got the history out of the way,
Yeah.
let's get into the review. What do you think?
We've talked about this blend in the past. We've touched on it, and we've talked about how revered the My Father factory has become over the years. You know, 2 former #1 cigars of the year in the Le Bijou, the Flor de las Antillas. So there's a lot of great cigars in our portfolio. The Cuban Classic is one of the original blends
Right.
that to me is an underdog. It's an overlooked blend that is very elegant, it's very nuanced. And every time I smoke it, I go back and I think to myself, I need to smoke this cigar more often.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The smoke on the cigar is kind of silky.
It is.
You know what I'm talking on the palate?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the cigar itself, to me, is more wood and spice.
Yes.
But there's something about that smoke that gives it a nice, clean, silky, velvety taste on the palate.
I definitely could see that. To me, it's a very elegant cigar. There's a lot of great flavor to it. To me, there's like light roast coffee notes that I
Yeah.
get from it. And, you know, in spending time in Nicaragua and being with Jaime and being with Pepin, I think if you asked Pepin about this blend, you know, and I've touched on like all their blends at times with both Pepin and Jaime, he would tell you that this cigar reminds him of cigars from the glory days of Cuba.
It's definitely Cuban-esque, yeah.
Well, so I think that's what he was trying to capture in this blend, and it's very nostalgic to him, you know. And I've talked to him about just blending styles in general. And Pepin and Jaime both love blends that are, to them have tradition, they have history. It reminds them of the best days in Cuba. And I think when they came up with this Cuban Classic, it's named that for a reason. To them, it resonates with history and it shows their lineage, to me. That's what I get from it when I smoke the cigar. Because even for me as a cigar enthusiast for over 30 years, every time I smoke the cigar, it does bring me back to when I was fortunate enough early in my career when people had cigars that they had saved, Cuban cigars that they had saved in their arsenal, and they shared them with me. And this cigar brings me back to those early days when I first started smoking cigars, and I was initially introduced to the Cuban cigars. You know, and world demand wasn't what it is today when it came to Cuban cigars, so they were able to be more patient and take more time with them. There was more consistency, not only in construction, but in flavor. So I think that obviously the Garcia family really hit their mark. To me, it brings me right back to when I smoked some of the glory days, you know, Cuban cigars in the glory days. I was fortunate enough to have that experience, and every time I smoked a Cuban Classic, it brings me right back there.
The cigar itself, for me, started off on the heavier side, but now that I'm into it, probably halfway, it definitely toned down a lot. It's definitely more medium plus.
Yeah, I would put the cigar, even for people that are, you know, occasional cigar smokers, at medium plus.
Yeah.
At its strongest.
Sure.
You know, it definitely has more nuanced flavors, a lot of complexity, layers of flavor. But all the flavors that when I'm looking for a Cuban-esque cigar, I'm looking for, there's a leather component to me. There's definitely a coffee note that's more of a kind of a medium roast, that's the strongest.
Yeah.
It's got a great coffee flavor.
Yeah, I definitely get the coffee.
Right? There's a little nuttiness to it, which is indicative of obviously Nicaraguan tobacco, but I get that leather quality, and I really enjoy that. And to me, when we use the word Cuban-esque, and people use it quite a bit at times, sometimes people tell you it's an overused term, and people are like, what does that mean? It's not a real Cuban. No, but if it harkens back to the glory days when Cuban cigars were phenomenal, right? That's a great thing. And to use that word Cuban-esque, to me it's a testament to a quality blend.
Right.
So the blend itself is very elegant all the way around. I think it's medium plus at its strongest to me.
Yeah.
A lot of nuanced flavors, and the construction is impeccable. Impeccable construction.
Yeah.
Cigar smoke's cool, but it builds in strength as you smoke it, and it's dynamic. I like the fact that there's a lot of layers of flavor on it.
Right.
But you know, to have a cigar that's so elegant, but yet so complex, to me, that's the art. That's the art of cigar blending. And of course, when you're going to name something a Cuban Classic and you come from Cuban lineage, there's a lot of pride there.
Right.
A lot of pride. So when the Garcias came up with this blend, they wanted to make sure they hit their mark, and they hit their mark, in my opinion. They really hit their mark.
So what other blends do you think remind you or have that Cuban-esque flavor?
That's a good question. For me, it always comes back to the seed variety, Habano seed. To me, that speaks of Cuban-esque flavors. So like La Roma de Cuba Edición Especial, Habano wrapper, beautiful wrapper, reddish brown. To me, that has it. Other blends from the My Father factory, Pete Johnson's blends, the Tatuaje.
Yeah.
To me, they're very Cuban-esque in nature. And there's a lot of them out there. But to me, if you want to kind of get that Cuban-esque flavor, I think it's a cigar that can't be overly aggressive and strong and intense. I think it has the subtleties and complexity. I think medium plus is about as strong as you want to go, and search out a cigar with a Habano seed wrapper. And I think you'll find it. Symmetry is another one that comes to mind. Habano wrapper, Nicaraguan and Dominican tobaccos. That's Cuban-esque. And a lot of the stuff in the My Father portfolio, because they like to use Habano wrapper because it's, again, familiar to them. That Habano seed produces a flavor profile that they basically cut their teeth on as young people in Cuba. So for me, a Cuban-esque blend needs to be elegant, full flavor, nothing too intense, because people like from years ago would say cigars from Cuba are so strong. But comparison today to New World cigars, they're really not. When you go back and you know, if you're away on vacation or if you're not from the U.S. and you smoke Cuban cigars, I think we could all agree they're not as strong as some people might make them out to be.
Right.
So I think it obviously has the complexity, but the strength meter I think is going to be medium plus. Stick to Habano seed wrapper, and to me you'll get that kind of Cuban-esque flair to a cigar. That's my take.
That sounds good. So as far as pairings go, what do you got for us?
Well, sticking with our theme, sticking with a spirit that basically the person behind the blend, the people behind the blend, I should say, Pepin and Jaime, they do like Scotch quite a bit. You know, if you ask Jaime, particularly, you know, Pepin jump around a little bit, a little rum, maybe a little Tonya, a little beer action, but he definitely likes Scotch whiskey as well. But Jaime is a huge fan of Scotch. Right. So with that in mind, today we chose the Bunnahabhain 12-year Scotch.
Nice.
Which is an interesting Scotch. You've had this?
I haven't had this one. I've had some of their limited release stuff, but I don't think I've had the 12 yet.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we kind of went with this, and I ultimately chose it, is because, you know, with all the big name distilleries out there in Scotland, Bunnahabhain to me is kind of like an underdog in its own right, kind of like the cigar is. Okay. Because it comes from the island of Islay, which is known for peated Scotch. Right. Bunnahabhain is notorious for unpeated. So for people out there that say, I don't want smoke, I don't want peat, but I want something unique. This Bunnahabhain 12 is very unique because it's not peated at all, and it comes from an area which is all the distilleries around it is all peat monsters. Peat, peat, peat. It's also the distilleries farthest north in that island. So a unique area. And I've read a little bit about it.
Is it sherry cast?
So it's aged in former bourbon and sherry casks.
Nice.
So really nice complex.
So right up my alley.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like, where the distillery's at is kind of cool because prior to 1960, you could only get there by boat, which is crazy to think about, right? So now, if you want to visit the distillery, there's like this romantic ride, one lane to the distillery. But it's it's a secluded area, and the fact that it's in peat country.
We should do it, by the way.
That would be fun. Listen, don't you threaten me with a good time.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be a very fitting Scotch, considering where it's at, the location it's at, right? To me, it's like, okay, they laid the groundwork for unpeated Scotch in a peated area, right, of Isla. The Garcias took their trade to Nicaragua, right? And they kind of revolutionized Nicaragua the way the blending styles were in Nicaragua. So to me, it's like they're kind of like pioneers in that.
Right.
And the Garcias are kind of pioneers in the tobacco in Nicaragua from that perspective. They kind of changed the landscape of Nicaraguan tobacco, in my opinion. And I think having, Bunnahabhain 12 in an area of Isla where it's known for repeated scotches, for something that's more, Euro speed for sure, and maybe people out there that don't want the peat, something that's former sherry cask, bourbon cask, I thought it'd be a home run with the cigar. And I know it would be Jaime approved. I know that for a fact. So are you ready to go?
Yeah,
you want to do the pour?
I'll do the pouring.
Let's go.
All right.
All right, Foch. Salud.
Salute. Really good. That's a good Scotch.
Isn't it?
Yeah, definitely getting the bourbon barrel.
Yeah. I was trying to think, because I was trying to think of what I'm tasting, and then I definitely get that kind of like bourbon-esque, which is interesting because it's a Scotch, but because it's aged in former bourbon barrels, you really get that bourbon factor.
Yeah.
That bourbon cask really shines through, right?
It definitely shines through. Obviously, I'm getting the sherry, but I mean, it's a good choice, good pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think for people out there that are bourbon fans that want to try a Scotch that suits them, I think this might be the one.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely know it's a Scotch, but that, like you said in the beginning, the bourbon barrel definitely shines through.
It definitely influences it, because when I think of bourbons, I think always notes of like vanilla. So on the nose, I get like a lot of like dry fruit on the nose. And then on the palate, to me, it has classic notes of bourbon. I get vanilla, maybe a little kind of like maple or brown sugar note to it. And there's like a candy, there's a sweetness to it too, which obviously bourbon has, and the sherry has. It gives it nice round flavors. There's a little wood there. Obviously it spends 12 years in barrels.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely getting the wood. I don't think there's any citrus.
I'm not getting much citrus for sure. I definitely get more of kind of that vanilla, brown sugar. There's a sweetness to it, but it has classic kind of like Scotch flavor too.
Well, for me, Scotch is one of those spirits that I tend to drink more in the winter. So
I get that.
Maybe I might have some during the year, but I mainly drink Scotch.
Yeah, I think a lot of people out there, I mean, I know I'm included in that bunch. So in other words, if I'm at a cigar lounge where obviously I don't have to deal with elements and it's not hot, it's well ventilated, it's cool. In the summer, I'll actually sip on Scotch. I like it quite a bit. But to be outside and drink Scotch or whiskey, it's not usually my choice. Right. That's where I'm usually leaning on, like, sipping tequila, maybe a rum drink or rum itself. But this has a very like warming kind of vibe to it, right?
I mean, it's not too high in alcohol either.
What is it?
I think it's like 46.
Okay. All right.
So it's not horrible.
No. I mean, listen. To anything that's something's going to get out of its way, and also we're talking about a pairing, right? we don't want the spirit to overpower the cigar. We always talk about that for sure. If you had anything that was higher proof, it might overpower the cigar.
Yeah.
But
I'm
think,
still tasting the cigar.
oh God, yeah, absolutely. And I think it complements the cigar really well because with the Cuban Classic, I don't get a lot of natural sweetness per se. Like there's a nuttiness to it, leather, there's spice, there's coffee, but I don't get a lot of sweetness from the cigar. I do get sweetness from the Scotch though, which is nice because there's like almost like even dry fruit on the nose, and there's a candy quality to it. I can't put my finger on it, but it's really nice kind of fruit flavors in it.
I'm getting, and I say this not often, but I've said this in the past, I'm tasting anise.
Yeah?
I don't know why.
You're sensitive to anise.
Yeah, for some reason.
You know, I have to say, as much as like I don't mind the taste of anise, but in the right spirit maybe,
Right.
or right setting, but I don't get that from this. And I know you do, but you have a phenomenal palate. But I always say that just goes to show you how taste is personal. What I gather from a cigar is different from what you gather for the most part.
You know what I'm getting now on the finish? Butterscotch.
That's what I'm probably trying to think of, candy, right?
Yeah. Definitely getting butterscotch now. And it does finish, it's got a long finish, which I like. So.
It's got a great long finish, a very long finish. And you know, it's kind of, this might sound odd. There's almost like a brininess, almost like a, you know, say sea salt, but like a saltiness in the finish. It's long, but if you think about it, there's something to it. Almost like salted, like I would say, like salted caramel. You know that contrast you get when you have some sweetness and there's something cutting it? It's almost like salt. I mean, you think about it, it's on an island, right? The only way to get there was by boat.
Yeah.
I'm sure the distillery might pick up some of that salt air, and you know, I think it might influence the spirit. It might.
It very well could.
Oh, I see you're dipping in a second.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you know what? Wait for your pouring.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in. But I think the way that this Scotch complements the cigar would, as I said, be definitely Jaime and Pepin approved. I think for sure it would.
Well, it's Faccia and Mazz approved. I know that.
Well, it's definitely Faccia and Mazz approved, no doubt. I mean, we're here. By the way,
Salud.
Salud.
I mean, you're doing pretty good with these pairings, by the way.
Well, I do my research.
You're picking some good spirits.
Well,
and good cigars.
I have to say, a lot of thought goes into it. I don't just come out with something. I mean, it has to obviously match as far as, because, you know, I've had the spirit before, had the cigar separately. I haven't had them together. We're experiencing that with our audience now, together. But you could put those flavor notes together, and knowing that the Cuban Classic, to me, doesn't bring sweetness, I wanted to bring a little sweetness to something that was Asian bourbon and sherry casks. But I do put a lot of thought into it, and we do with everything we do. The guys behind the camera do a phenomenal job. There's a ton of thought behind the camera. We try to prepare as much as possible, you know, within reason.
Yeah.
Some people would say relax when it comes to, like, you know, reading or maybe notes, you know. I don't know, but there's a lot of thought process, because I want to hit my mark too when it comes to pairings, because there's a story to tell. Cigars have great history. We touched on that. You know, distilleries in Scotland have great history, and the fact that, you know, like, you know, that's a distillery you can only get to by boat until 1960.
Right.
It's in an area of Islay where it's all peated scotches, and it stands alone. Where Bunnahabhain, which, by the way, the name, when you look at the bottle, it's intimidating, right? To pronounce it, but it's Bunnahabhain, right? Not Bunnahabhain. Bunnahabhain.
I don't know.
Right, but there's a lot of scotches out
I say
there.
Bunnahabhain.
No, you're right. No, you actually got it right. I can't believe you did, but you got it. But yeah, but Bunnahabhain is one of those distilleries in the land of peat that stands for exceptional non-peated scotches. So the thought process is to find a gem, right? And, you know, to me, the Cuban Classic is almost like a hidden gem in plain sight, with all the other portfolio, the Garcia family, you know, exceptional portfolio with high ratings. I think you always can come back to the Cuban Classic and feel right at home with it. Bunnahabhain, phenomenal scotch. To me, it's a very approachable scotch too. Like the cigar, I think it's a very approachable cigar. And that's what you want. You know, you want, if the spirit doesn't bring something to the table, you want it to come out of the cigar, right? And then vice versa. If the cigar doesn't bring an element to the table that you want to get on the palate, the spirit could bring that to the table. So to me, that kind of yin and yang, I've always said that works perfectly for me. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to challenge my palate, and I want both at work. I want a little sweetness, I want leather, spice, coffee. To me, it's perfect marriage.
Good job.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have to definitely got to keep this going.
Yep.
I almost hate to say goodbye.
Yeah.
So what do you think if we just chose to sit here?
Let's just sit here a little bit and
Yeah,
let them
you
watch.
you think all the guys out there will stay tuned?
Well,
They're going to watch. They're going to be like, oh, these guys are finishing up their dram of scotch.
Yeah.
They're smoking their Cuban classic. We're just going to just be silent for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
I don't think so. No, we can't put them through it.
Nah.
They're too good to us.
They are.
They support us.
Yes,
a lot
they
of
do.
followers, a lot of subscribers.
Yep.
We owe them a goodbye.
Yes, we do.
So I'm going to give it to them.
All right.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. But before we depart, make sure you hit that like button.
Smash the subscribe button, and we'll see you here next time.
Salud, my man.
Good job.
Thank you, brother. You too. Man, that's good.
That is good. This is another bottle I'm gonna have to get.
You need to get it.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
good.
believe that's not in your arsenal
Yeah,
already.
no. I mean, I don't have much Bunnahabhain. Like I said, I have a limited release that I found years ago, and you can't get it now, obviously.
Well, yeah, but would you agree that's like a sleeper scotch?
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it is. Because like, as unpeated scotches go, there's so many that are, Aberlour,
Yeah,
Macallan,
sure.
Glenfarclas, which I love.
Well, now the Glendronach again, it went crazy.
Correct. But as scotch goes, especially in the land of peat, this thing rings. It does its job. And with this cigar, as a matter of fact, next time I go to Nicaragua, we're bringing some of that. We're going to share it with Jaime and Pepin.
Yeah.
And we're going to sit down with a Cuban classic. We're going to let it have it. Right?
Yeah.
You want to come on that trip?
Yeah, sure.
Nah, you're not allowed.
Oh, great.